I've got Cliff Kingsbury joining me later in this show. What do you think of the Cardinals draft, starting with Isaiah Simmons on down? Josh Jones, Lecky Fotu, Rashard Lawrence out of LSU, a fourth-round selection, Evan Weaver, and then Eno Benjamin from right around their backyard at Arizona State.
Yeah, well, I think you have to tie in their draft with DeAndre Hopkins as well, because that was a big-time move, and now they have a pretty interesting receiving core. Isaiah Simmons, to me, is freakish. He's one of those guys. I don't believe there'll be an Isaiah Simmons who comes along every year when there's a guy who's almost 6'4", 238 pounds, and moves like that. I'll be very curious to see how he's deployed. I see him as a safety in a base defense, and then, of course, when you get to your sub-packages, he can line up in multiple positions depending on what you're doing that given week against the opponent. But I think he's a player who's a space player. Despite his size, he's not truly a physical player, but he's a freakish athlete. I think you want to get him away from the bodies, not where the bodies are. So that's why I believe he's more of a safety type in a base defense. His size says linebacker, but his style of play says safety.
Oh, man, I mean, I guess what, Tyrann Mathieu is somebody that people are saying, like a bigger Tyrann Mathieu has been the...
kind of what he is, or a Derwin James type. And Derwin James is probably more physical, but he's really kind of a big, freakish Tyrann Mathieu.
In terms of getting ready for the season, it's pieces of a puzzle. It's free agency, it's draft, it's also who you might be able to acquire right around the new league year. And DeAndre Hopkins with Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk and making, and, you know, obviously that's when, you know, the move that they made last year also for Kenyon Drake, him signing his tender, of course he's going to want to stay there. I have no question about that. Man, to be able to go ahead and turn that into the 2020 season with Kyler Murray in this mix off of the Offensive Rookie of the Year with Kingsbury, this is very exciting in the desert. Certainly with Simmons, if you think he would be on the level in between Chandler Jones and in front of Patrick Peterson, that is some serious
Chandler
business.
Jones may be the most overlooked great pass rusher in the league simply because he plays for Arizona, and no one ever talks about Arizona. But his sack totals over the last 4 or 5 years are off the charts. He is a great pass rusher.
He sure is. And in that division, I mean, no wonder the 49ers want to go out and get Trent Williams. What'd you make of that move? How significant is that move?
Really significant, because I think with that offense, number one, it starts with the run game. And then in pass protection, you're dealing with a quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo who's very, very rhythmic. And the longer he stays in the pocket, in my view anyway, based on tape, the less effective he is. He is truly a rhythm player. So pass protection is absolutely critical. And even though he's not a statue, he's not really mobile in a strict sense. He's not going to make a lot of plays outside of the structure of the offense. So I thought that was a really, really good move. So you have to count that as well as part of what they did in the draft, because now they have a starting caliber left tackle who's coming in to replace a guy who's maybe well be a Hall of Famer in Joe Staley, and they don't miss a beat on the left side because Trent Williams at his best is a top, 2 or 3 left tackle in the league.
Oh, gosh, that's why I said John Lynch, the 49ers had the best draft. The best draft to me is, when or you could say the best draft the day after the draft with some level of certainty when players are selected that are widely viewed as significantly talented, and to take a second first-round selection that you get because you're flipping a player as talented as Buckner to a team that's right there in the middle of the first round, and you can then turn that pick into a younger, cheaper, or less expensive, let's use that phrase, version of him, while also paying somebody else on a defensive line that also includes Dee Ford, who's your second-round selection from this year, so you could kind of slot Dee Ford in there if you want, along with Nick Bosa from last year. I mean, I could go on as I did yesterday. And then you draft someone like Ayuk with the fourth-round selection you get to move out of that first-round spot, just one spot, so another team can select the offensive lineman that they wanted. And if you could sit there and go, man, you could have taken that offensive lineman, certainly with Staley retiring. No. You're going to flip that fourth rounder later on to the first for the wide receiver, and then get Trent Williams later on. I mean, that is, and I'd even mention the other picks that they got.
Widely considered to be quality players. there's a certain group of those guys, and then there's a lot of guys who are are evaluated, by people like me, or and some of us sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. Daniel Jeremiah, who's great at this.
Yes.
And now we have a ton of internet people who do this, and they start ripping picks or loving picks, and it's simply based on their view of the player, and that's okay. That's the fun of it. But I like to take the approach that these teams do a lot of work, and they have a pretty good sense of who they're drafting and why they're drafting. And of course, they don't all work out, but I like to think they know what they're doing.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.